So again, my name is Jerica Holton. I am the product marketing manager here at Greenshades. I've been a greenie since 2002. I work across the different product groups here, and I have a background in retail and also rolling out some workforce management software.
Hey everybody, Chris Haddon here from Greenshades. I am, what's my title these days? Revenue strategy and operations is what I oversee, but I've been at Greenshades since 2009. I was in the space prior to that for a little bit of time before then, and I've had a lot of different roles over the years at Greenshades, and I am certainly a big fan of compliance. So Greenshades is a great place to work. I love talking payroll and taxes and all those fun things. And I'm excited to be here today. And thank you all for your time today.
Hi, I'm Laura Deitch. I am the compliance manager. I've been with Greenshades just slightly over 10 years. I graduated with a degree in accounting and business management many years ago. And my little side gig, I can't get enough tax stuff here through Greenshades, so I do individual tax returns on the side.
Oops, sorry, I'm Alicia Rocks. I've been here for about 11 years now myself, and like Chris, I've kind of been all over the company. My current role is strategic initiatives manager, but tax has been kind of my wheelhouse since I've been here at Greenshades. So I'm also excited to be a part of this webinar.
Awesome, thanks guys. So for today's agenda, as you can see, we have some seasoned professionals here with us today to go over some of the questions and topics that you guys submitted beforehand. So for today's agenda, we're going to go through some of those topics and questions. We had some inquiries about e-file requirements, the new 1099 portal, navigating those 1095 forms, avoiding delays in filing, and then filing with Greenshades. We're planning on leaving a big portion at the end for that Q&A session. So as we go through these topics, if you didn't get a chance to submit anything beforehand, please feel free to drop those questions in, because at the end, we do want to hear from you guys. So please feel free to drop in anything you may have questions about. And then just before we get into the content, just one little legal disclaimer. This is not formal legal advice. We also are not allowed to give out that tax legal information advice to you. We are able to answer things about the filing process, how software can help. So we will love those questions at the end, but anything that may require tax or legal advice, we'll point you in the direction of somebody like my HR counsel. So we're going to kick off the webinar with the changes to e-file requirements, and I'm going to kick it over to Laura.
So this year, this tax season year, the file, or I should say the form count, has gone down to 10. That's a collective amount over all your federal forms, your W-2s, your 1099s, 1098s, W-2Gs, even your ACA forms. So if you're filing a collective amount of over 10, you have to file electronically, which is where Greenshades comes into play. So some of those forms, as I mentioned, are the 1095 B and C, your ACA forms, your 1042, which reports foreign income, your 1098 series, all the not the W9s, but the 1099s. We do support about 15 of those forms. And there's, the W2s are in there. So for you, the employer, it's your collective amount of your federal forms that you're submitting. If it's over 10, we will be here to help you do the e-filing.
Perfect. And now we'll get into the new 1099 portal.
As part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the IRS was tasked with coming up with a more modernized, more user-friendly system to report your 1099s. So this is the first year IRIS is open, and IRIS stands for Information Returns Intake System. So we at Greenshades, we have gone through all the testing and passed into production to submit your 1099s through IRIS. If you yourself want to do the submission, you can do that through IRIS. You would have had to already set up an application for IRS and received your TCC form. If you have not done that yet, as I mentioned earlier, Greenshades is here. We will assist you in filing. If you still want to use FIRE, that is still a viable option. If you're using FIRE, especially for your forms other than 1099s, you are going to have to use the TCCs. If you did not save them under your e-services profile, you are going to have to reapply for TCCs for either FIRE or IRIS. If you have not done that, again, we're here. We do have all the necessary submission information, TCCs, logins, all of that to submit your filing for you.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. Now we're going to pass it over Chris to go through some of those 1095C forms.
All right, everybody's favorite topic. So, just in general, I'll say we're going to talk about these 1095C forms just for the sake of time. We're going to keep it fairly high level. We could, and we certainly have, before done webinars kind of dedicated specifically to these forms. They're fairly complex, even with how many years they've been around at this point. The Affordable Care Act is not a new topic or a new regulation at this point. It's been around for over a decade, but it's still a challenging one to manage. So a quick recap though here. So the form 1095C, this is the form that just about every employer is having to deal with these days. So this is going to be the form that you're going to be issuing to your employees, specifically your full-time hires, but you're going to be reporting these 1095C forms, reporting the coverage that was offered to them. You're going to be reporting kind of like the cost of that coverage, of that minimal viable coverage, and then also kind of the months of coverage. So if you go out to irs.gov, I think we'll probably include a link to it in the recap as well, but you can see the form. It's broken down by month, so there's a lot of detail that needs to be provided there. Fortunately, when we're talking about these deadlines, when it comes to issuing the 1095C forms, we do have a little bit extra time, so it's not something that you have to do in January. Just about every year, if not every year now. I think that there's always been this automatic extension in place. So for the 2023 tax year reporting year, these forms are due to the recipients by March 1st, need to be postmarked by March 1st. And then when we're actually talking about reporting to the IRS, the 1094C, kind of that summary sheet, if you will, that needs to get reported by the end of February or February 28th. And then if you file electronically, you have until April 1st. So you do get a little bit extra time for that. All right, so on the next slide here, we'll be talking about the Form 1095B. So this is something, I think we had a question about this. So most of you, really, you might be, as an individual, you might be receiving a 1095B form in the mail from your own insurance provider, but generally speaking, most employers aren't having to issue these. Specifically, it relates to if you have kind of self-insured coverage. So it's similar to the 1095C form in that it is being issued to specifically more subscribers, and it's going to have some key information that recipient needs when performing their taxes or looking for any type of tax credits. And this is also going to include the dependents on that form. So if you have family coverage, something like that. So again, most of you this won't impact. For those of you that do have to deal with the Form 1095B form, that is also something Greenshades can help with. The deadlines are the same, fortunately. So we're looking at March 1st for those recipient copies, and then you need to file these to the IRS by the end of February or February 28th this year, and then e-file by April 1st. So just to touch a little bit more on the Form 1095C form. So we again, we don't have an image of it or anything on these slides, but very simply, I'm sure you've all seen it before, but you can go out to irs.gov and easily check out this form. So as you'll see, I talked about earlier, there's a monthly breakdown where we're needing to report some really key information to these recipients. So we've got line 14, line 15, and line 16. The line 14, that row on the form, that's where you're reporting the type of coverage that was offered. Was it minimum essential coverage? Was it minimum viable coverage, et cetera? And then line 15 is where you're going to be actually reporting that contribution from the employee, essentially the cost of that lowest tier plan that was available to the employee that met that minimum threshold. And then line 16 is generally where the safe harbor codes are going to go, so that if, for example, you didn't offer coverage to an employee on a particular month, this is where you're providing the information such as, hey, they weren't a full-time hire. And so there's a very long list of codes that are applicable here, both for the line 14 and the line 16. These codes can be found on the 1094, 1095C instructions page on irs.gov. It is, as I mentioned, it's very long at this point, and it seems like every single year the IRS continues to add more codes. There's additional complexity that's introduced here. It's crazy to think about, but in the relative early days, even like a decade ago at this point, of the Affordable Care Act, it seemed complicated at that point. Granted, it was new, but it seemed very complicated. But somehow there just continues to be more codes added every single year. And so now we've got all the way down to from 1A all the way to 1Z. So we've got a handful of codes there that the IRS has as reserved for future use. So, we know that probably at some point there's going to be some additional codes coming around that. So again, just for the sake of time, we didn't try to kind of digest all of that here in this single setting or go through those codes in detail. Certainly that is something that Greenshades can assist with, but in general, and there's a lot of complexity involved here, and I would definitely recommend, be it with Greenshades or anybody else, if you're needing to solve for this, for generating the 1095C forms, I would not say just go out and try to do it on your own. Either partner with a software provider like Greenshades to help with this, or a different software provider, even if it's not Greenshades, or certainly a tax professional that specializes in the Affordable Care Act, because the codes on the surface seem pretty straightforward, but again, there continues to be more and more nuance every year that seems to be added by the IRS.
Thank you for that, Chris. And as Chris mentioned, there are some links to the IRS website that can really help out with that ACA stuff. So as the webinar concludes in a few days, you guys will get a recap, and we'll be sure to drop those links in there for you guys. So now we're going to dive into avoiding delays in filing.
Number one, if the earlier you filed, if you have us print and send out your forms, the cheaper it is. When you get into your miscellaneous, your divs, your NAC, all the various 1099 forms that we support, you want to get them out before January 31st. And the reason I say that is if that file does not pass the submission, if it gets rejected, you want to be able to get it corrected prior to that due date. So there's due dates for when you have to issue them to the recipients. There's due dates when they have to, the e-file has to be to the IRS. Your NAC, because you're reporting contractor costs, that's your first one that's going to be submitted by January 31st. The recipient copies, all those forms are January 31st. There is a delay in when you have to get the e-file out to March 31st, with the exception of that 1099 NAC. I do want to mention the 1099K, that had gone down to where almost everybody was going to get a 1099K if there was credit card payments. They have recently, the IRS, have gone back to what the requirements were prior. So at 20,000 and 200 transactions. They're calling this another transitional year. So they're not making it the $600 count with all transactions this year. They're reverting back to that. So if you have all that information, it doesn't mean that you can't submit something that is less than the 20,000 and the 200 for the K, or any of these forms. It's that, but if you do, that vendor does go over those minimum standards, then, you do have to issue them. We do also offer the TIN matching. So if you're not sure that your EINs are matching the vendor name correctly, that vendor name is very important, as is the business name control. So when you're creating those files, you do want to make sure that information is correct to avoid any type of having your file rejected. The BSO, which takes on the W-2s, has initiated a pre-validation check. If your file does not pass that pre-validation, and it could be because of a bad SSN that starts maybe with a 666 or a 9, it's going to reject. If there's a negative number in there, it's going to reject. They will not even issue what we call the WFID, the Wage File Identification Number. So it's important not to wait to the last minute to get these files in. So you know for a fact, if for whatever reason things might get bounced, rejected, you have time to get it corrected and submitted on time. Some situations with the W-2s, they will say that you have up to 45 days to resubmit. When you go to resubmit a file, you're not submitting the same information again. You're submitting the corrected information, but the entire file as a corrected information. It's not a W-2C when it's a resubmission. It's so you have your original submission. If that went through fine, you received your WFID. Unless there's something additional after that that would reject that file, you should be in the clear. They do allow files to get through with the prior year Social Security wage base, but that file will eventually reject. So make sure all your Social Security wage bases in your accounting packages are up to date for your tax year 2023. ITINs won't be accepted because they start with a 9. They won't accept those. That I've seen those being rejected also. So don't wait till the last day to get these files submitted. And you want to make sure your W-2s are reconciled with your 941s. So you're going to be reconciling your federal wages, your federal income taxes, your Social Security and tip wages, and Medicare tips, income and tips wages. Those need to match almost to the penny. They do allow a little wiggle room, like maybe, a couple dollars off possibly, but those things need to be correct for your file to get past that pre-validation and receive that WFID receipt number. And if you have any problems or any questions with that, reach out to support and we'll work with you to get those corrected and submitted. And if you do have, if you are submitting your own W-2 file, like with your 1099 files, you're going to have to get set up with your ID.me or login.gov, I think it is, or one of the multi-factor authentication logins that the Internal Revenue Service and the Social Security Administration are now requiring for you to gain access to file. So you got to make sure you have all those credentials set up correctly. The ID.me, it only takes about 10 or 15 minutes to get it done. I recommend you have your laptop or your desktop in front of you along with your cell phone and your driver's license. It's very simple. You start the process on your laptop. It'll send you a link to your telephone to scan in your photo ID front and back, and then it'll send you another link to do the biometric scan of your face. So it's creating a very secure login, and that's one of the reasons why they're doing that. Sometimes seems like it's additional work for nothing, just making things more difficult, but it is creating that very secure login. So, make sure if you're planning on submitting your own file, you have all this stuff in place and ready to go prior to that, along with getting that file created prior to, give yourself some wiggle room there in case there is something wrong with that file. Just to guarantee everything is submitted on time.
Perfect. So we'll move on to Alicia to get into filing with Greenshades. So how we're filing those W-2s and 1099 forms.
All right, I'm going to cover a few different things here. So for clients who are going to be using us for Greenshades year-end filing, there are a couple different ways, obviously, that you can get your data over to us. We do have some clients using our in-house payroll package. That does not currently support 1099s, but it does do W-2s. And so what you're going to do is go into the payroll module and generate your W-2s. There's a button there that exists to be able to send that info over to your end forms. And that'll get you started in the Greenshades process. If you are using an accounting package outside of Greenshades, we do have some workflows for that as well, which our support team can happily walk you through. I won't go into too much detail of all of those. But in short, you want to close out your year and get that data file over to us so that we can extrapolate that and turn it into W-2s. Once you get that data over here into year-end forms, you can see here in the screenshot, we have a pretty easy checklist to follow. You're going to start with your basic company setup. That includes things like your EIN, your state account numbers, making sure all of those are set up correctly. And then also making sure that all of the locals that we expect for you are accounted for and mapped properly, because that will come into play with your local W-2 return. Once you get past all that basic setup, as Laura kind of talked about before, we do offer SSNV, and when you get to 1099s, 10V matching to make sure that the person's name matches the Social Security number on file with the SSA. That used to be a 24-hour process. It's now a 48-hour process due to some changes, but we are trying to get those turned around as quickly as possible, but make sure that you start early on that so that that's not a delay for you in e-filing. Once you get all of that back, you next want to check to make sure that any of the errors and warnings that we're flagging for you in that set of forms are verified to be correct. Sometimes the things that we flag there may be warnings, more of an FYI and not necessarily a rejection option. So just be sure, based on the severity of the warning you're looking at, that you're double checking the high warnings, make sure those are resolved. Medium and low warnings are usually more of an FYI, but just double check them to be sure. Once you get past that step, we're moving on to verifying totals. That is a very important step that I have found over the years a lot of people miss. They just want to automatically assume everything that they sent to us is in here, and while that is generally true, sometimes there may be edits that were done in your accounting package that didn't make it into the data file that was sent over to Greenshades. So it's always a good idea to double check, even if you just want to spot check and make sure that things are correct. That will at least save you some time in doing corrections later down the road. And then once you've decided everything's good, it's time to turn on those forms for your employees to either download and print or download and send off to their CPA. And there's a couple different things, a couple different steps in there to do that. You can send out an email to let them know. You can turn on access on Green Employee if that is something that your company has with Greenshades, and then they can download those files directly. And then the last step before actually getting to the e-files is forms distribution. There are print and mail deadlines that we have based on postage and other things. So make sure that you have a kind of a deadline in mind of budget as well, what you guys are trying to spend on your forms. If you're able to release your forms early online to your employees, that may save you a little bit of money in the long run as well. If they download their forms, those are less that you have to distribute. Some people still choose to distribute all anyway. And then the last step there, once you get through all of those, is to submit all of your state, local, and federal returns. All right, and you'll notice the 1099 process is very similar. As I mentioned, there's a couple different ways to get data into Greenshades. The main one that we usually see for 1099s, if someone is not set up with a sync product to send this information directly, is an Excel template. We do have these templates available for all of the forms that we offer in Greenshades. So make sure that you pick the proper template for the forms you're trying to import. Same process as with the W-2s, your basic company setup information, your EIN, make sure everything is mapped correctly. Verify that your vendors' TINs actually match their company name. And then walk through the different warnings that we might flag to make sure that your 1099 file is not going to get rejected. Once you've made it through those first 4 steps, same process applies here. Make sure you're mailing out your 1099s in a reasonable time frame so that they're all postmarked by the 31st. And then once you've made it through e-file, once you've made it through form distribution, you're going to move on to the e-file process. And that's usually pretty easy. The 1099s is one step. And then for states that you would like to send this off to, for states that are a part of the 1099 federal program, those states receive that information dispersed to them from the federal file. So just make sure that your state is a part of that program and that they will, that receiving that information through that program satisfies the needs for your state. There are a few states that I believe still require an actual form. But yeah, that is the gist of what I had for you guys today as well.
Thank you for joining us for another installment of our Year in Form series. We have 2 webinars left: correcting year forms with confidence next year, and payroll strategies for seamless filing the week after. So please feel free to join us. Thank you, guys.